voice of women in sport.
Welcome to Off the Track on WIS Sports Radio, episode 10. Off the Track is about flat track roller derby, featuring exclusive interviews. I'm Mick Swagger, and at WIS Sports, we believe that women in sport deserve equal coverage. Thank you for joining me on this all-new show about roller derby. Off the Track podcast is hosted by me, Mick Swagger. My pronouns are she, her. Off the Track features interviews of coaches, players, former players, business owners, officials, announcers, and fans of flat track roller derby. We can be found on WIS Sports Radio. This episode was recorded on the traditional lands of the Paiute people, which encompass several bands of Paiute in the state you call Nevada. I'd like to give acknowledgement that this land is unceded and stolen and pay respect to their elders past and present. Today we will air part 1 of a 2-part episode called Allyship, How We Can Support Minorities in Roller Derby. Allyship is a balance of active support that requires action. It's more than words and implementing policy. We must walk our talk. In the presentation you're about to hear, myself and Mary Fagdalene will talk about our journey as a couple in navigating this topic. We'll give specific examples of racism that I experienced and how Fags learned to recognize microaggressions, talk to their teammates and friends, and how they confronted those problems head on.
Mick and I are going to have a really hard time keeping to time, and we're going to try so hard not to go down like wormholes of talking about our experience of the 2016 season and really try and rein it into continuing to come back to allyship. We're still healing from some of this stuff, and especially for Mick, so it can be easy for us to get a bit like, and so you might see us just kind of like give each other some like gentle little reminders. We're gonna, if there's not time for questions at the end, this space has to be vacated in an hour, so we'll go somewhere else and we'll just keep chatting, and it'll be really informal, and it'll just be with me to talk about anything that we want to like keep going with.
If anything comes up that's triggering for people, because we will be talking about bullying, we'll be talking about racism, we'll be talking about microaggressions, we understand that because it's triggering for us too. So if you need to take a moment, take a friend or step outside or leave altogether, totally welcome to do that. We understand, and you can come back as well if you're like, okay, I'm chill, I splashed some water on my face or I screamed. Come back in, So we just wanted to acknowledge that some of this might be triggering. Also that we are going to record it because we want to share it with the Derby universe. I think it's important information to share for people, and I have a podcast that has a little bit of a platform, and that's really awesome. And WIS Sports, it's hard to say altogether, it's like a tongue twister. They're very gracious and really interested in the roller derby community and giving us access and space to airtime and to millions of listeners, and that's incredible. So we want to post it there. And I felt weird about a Facebook Live thing because people kept asking, and I was like, oh, I don't know. It's a lot. So I think we'll just record it. I'll figure out and learn how to edit, and we'll post it there. So if you take away things or want to bring it up in your league, you'll have that later.
Yeah. And before we get into the story, really want to acknowledge that this is not to bash VRDL. When you guys are listening to this story, I want you to think of yourself, and I want you to think of your league, and I want you to think of your world, because this is beyond roller derby. This is a place that we are in community together. And so this is not about finger pointing, because I think that this could happen anywhere, maybe more particularly in Australia. Given that we'll be talking a bit about how to be an ally, we're going to talk quite a bit about some things that I didn't get right and how it affected my partner. And so I want to bring that to you guys, not to set myself up as an expert or like I'm a perfect human because or a white ally because my partner is brown. I'm not. We are a mixed race couple, which means that we deal with racism very close to home. It's not that it doesn't exist between us any longer, but we grapple with it in every situation in our life of the two different places that we come from. So I hope that some of like my mistakes gives you guys courage that one, sometimes we make them, because we have grown up in a culture that is based on white supremacy. And as white folk, we're the benefactors of it, and for POC, they experience the really negative parts of that. And so sometimes we don't see what we don't see until we see it. And when we have that aha moment, it's probably because something not great has happened. But we can also recover from it, and we can learn from it, and we don't have to live in the shame of something forever. So I hope that as we go through this, what comes out is some really good moments, some really crappy moments, and how we continue on our journey as an ally and not shut down from that, but actually grow from it.
Thank you. And for me, as a POC I exist in a white world. A lot of my friends are white, my partner is white, and I have a lot of white family members. This experience is also about me bringing people along and not just shutting them out or feeling angry and leaving, because I've done that in the past and it didn't serve me. It didn't serve in my growth and my progression as a person and as a good person. I want to create a better world for not just myself, but for my family, for all of the wonderful kids in my family, and for my community. And so this is really important for me as a POC as well. So we're going to just run through some vocab first. I assume we asked people to listen to the podcast. It'd be great if you did, or if you researched a little bit or already know and talked to friends about it. But we just want to kind of have refreshers on some stuff, because maybe you didn't have time, and that's okay too. So just the first one, talking about racism, which is prejudice, discrimination, antagonistic treatment based on that social construct of race. Systemic racism, leading into, are systems in society which oppress people based on their race, i.e. higher interest rates, loss of job advancement, all of those types of things that can happen. And if you listen to the podcast, there are examples of that within roller derby.
White supremacy. The nature of colonial societies inherently privileges white people, white identities, and the status of whiteness. This includes how white people fare better in economic terms, as well as how white people experience superior outcomes in other ways, such as education and health, and how all of these systemic inequalities happen through established institutional arrangements, cultural norms, and public policies. We're going to be talking about cultural norms a lot today, so I want you guys to think about that in the context of cultural norms.
Code switching, one that POC probably know well, the use of a certain dialect, accent, language variety over another based on the situation that you're in. We're very used to switching back and forth into being in different places in the world that we have to live. And some of you might know that based on like hanging out with a religious family and being queer and having to change who you are and having to code switch into a different space.
Mick gets a res accent.
When I go home.
Microaggression, that's another big one for today. We're going to talk about that a bit. Indirect, subtle, or unintentional, you might not even mean it. Discrimination against members of a marginalized group.
Gaslighting, it's a form of psychological manipulation. It seeks to sow seeds of doubt in a targeted individual or members of a targeted group, making them question their own memory, perception, and sanity. People do that unintentionally as well. We do that to rape victims a lot, rape survivors a lot, and we do that to ourselves as POC all the time.
How do you move the screen?
You click enter, return, but we got to do emotional.
Emotional labor, that's what's happening right now. In this context, refers to the ways in which people, usually women and or people of colour, are expected to constantly expend their time and energy on unpaid and unacknowledged tasks, such as educating others, coddling people's feelings, providing emotional support without expecting any in return.
You can do it.
White privilege. I got this definition from Renee Ito Lodge's book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. Now that I'm talking about it, you should read that book. It's really good. And there's just like gold all the way through it. So she talks about white privilege as an absence of the consequences of racism, absence of structural discrimination, absence of your race being viewed as a problem first and foremost, absence of less likely to succeed because of my race, absence of funny looks directed at you because you are believed to be in the wrong place, and an absence of Western cultural expectations, an absence of violence enacted on your ancestors because of the colour of their skin, an absence of a lifetime of subtle marginalisation and othering, an exclusion from the narrative of being human.
White feminism, politics that engages itself with myths such as I don't see race. It's politics that insists talking about how race fuels racism, therefore denying POC the words to articulate our existence. It's a politics that expects POC to quietly assimilate into institutionally racist structures without kicking up a fuss. It allows POC a place at the table if we're willing to settle for tokenism, but it clamps down if we create accountability for said consensus, let alone any structural change. I wanted to talk a bit about restorative justice, and I have a bit of a, so we'll be talking a lot in this workshop and the next about punitive, restorative, and transformative justice and what those three things mean. But a punitive justice system is one that punishes people for broken rules of a system. So it's not necessarily like interpersonal stuff, but it's mostly like people are, you speed, you get a fine. That kind of thing, where you're just being punished and you're meant to learn to not to speed. But I don't know if anyone has ever learned not to speed based on a ticket. I haven't. And then what I grew up with was restorative justice. And restorative justice is an Indigenous value of coming together as a community for healing and for restoration of balance. And we talk a lot about balance and being in harmony with ourselves and with our community. And what that means is, if we have harmed somebody or a family or an individual of a family, instead of just punishing that one person and this person going away, harmed, in a punitive system, this person would testify, the harmed person would testify in a system of court, and the other person would go to jail. And then there would be no interaction. And if there was an interaction, it might come down the road in the form of a letter, I'm sorry, and I've accepted their apology. So in restorative justice, we all come to the table. Everybody knows what's going on. We are not hiding that information. We're not signing NDAs and asking for confidentiality, because if we can't heal together, those people aren't going to be able to heal either. If we can't tell our story, and if we can't say what's harming us and what's triggering us, then how do we heal from that? So restorative justice is about putting things back in balance. Transformative justice talks more about using that idea of restorative justice, but within the context of society. So how do we bring in counselors if people really need intense counseling? Like, what are some systems that we can put in place to transform a person that has done harm to people? So those are kind of the differences. And then decolonization. So there's a lot of different ideas of what decolonization is. There's a lot of different ideas within Indigenous culture and Indigenous society. So if you really think about it, decolonization is removing colonization. The colonizers, we're talking about South Africa asking white people to leave their country so they can restore their balance. That's a form of decolonization. For me, and for what I think about personally, and it's different for everybody, I really think it's okay to have a difference of opinion on this. I don't want people to leave Turtle Island. I don't want all of you to go back to wherever a DNA test says that you come from. I want to create a space where we take away those harmful things of colonization, such as patriarchy, and we break that down and we build ourselves into our culture and our society into a place that is safe and is able to allow everyone to thrive and exist and to honor each other's culture and honor how we may go about that process. So for me, going through this process is a form of decolonizing roller derby. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay.
Just before we go on, there's a quote that I didn't write down, so I might butcher it a little bit, but it's from an Aboriginal activist in Australia that's really resonated with me a lot, because there are definitely times where, as a younger person, I like struggle with white guilt and like wanting to like help brown people and that kind of stuff. And what she said to like people that were coming to her lands to like be allies was, if you've come here to help, like just turn right back around. We don't need your help. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then we can have a conversation. And like every time I hear that, like it just like strikes this beautiful chord. And my hope for today is that that's what we come to, that there is like healing and hope and like possibility of like beautiful relationship, like for white people and people of colour. We have a beautiful relationship and we try and embody that, and we like, it's hard and we mess up, and we're going to talk about that. So I'll like rein in my emotions, and we'll start talking about this story. So again, think about yourself. Don't worry about like all of the roller derby hotshots that you can think of on that team. It's not about those people. It's about like using this story to understand racism, microaggressions, how to be an ally. Yeah. So, Mick, do you want to kick off with talking about what the beginning of that season looked like, felt like, what was going on for you?
Sure. I was coming off of coaching, bench coaching VRDL, not full-time because I didn't live in Australia, but just for tournaments and a tiny bit of coaching. I would say like I was there for 6 weeks out of the entire year, and then I met them at tournaments. So I didn't do a lot of interacting with the entire team, except in situations where we were like, you know, excited and gearing up for a tournament. And that season was very wonderful for me. I felt like it was very successful. I learned a lot as a coach. I felt like the team developed quite a bit. I think that some people thought it was successful, others didn't. And then many people retired at the end of that season. They were all my friends. Or they went to other leagues. And I was like, oh, well, okay, that's that. I'm done. And I wasn't really interested in coaching again because we were kind of figuring out life. So I was, you know, Shayna moved to Melbourne, and I knew her from being on Team USA, but I didn't know her well, and was thinking maybe we should play a season together. But I was hesitant because I had a interpersonal conflict with someone on the team that had a problem with their playtime the year before and had become verbally abusive in social situations when alcohol was involved. And I didn't want to be involved in that because I don't like to put myself in those situations. And I think that, you know, a lot of times we kind of like forgive people when they act crazy in derby when they're drunk. It's like, oh, they were just drunk. Happens all the time. I've done that. And we don't always call each other up on those times. We kind of just let it go, and then it happens again. We might talk to them, it happens again. So I'm coming into that situation not really interested, but thinking maybe I could play again, I'm not sure. The other dynamic was going from coach and bench coach to skater, and that's a difficult transition. And I know that a lot of us have gone from skater to coach, but I don't know how many of us have gone from bench coach to skater. It's a strange transition, a power dynamic that I didn't even think existed and was very naive about existed. You know, I'm going into this new leadership that kind of was like, well, you might have been the reason we lost that game against Gotham or something. You know, like there might have been a little bit of that. So it was hard. And I was experiencing microaggressions right away. They started happening right away. And I wasn't with the team the year before, so I didn't experience them the year past. I had to prove myself. That's normal in derby. But I also had the privilege of skating on a lot of top teams, and although I had to prove myself to make my play time, I was always on a roster. So there's a different dynamic there that I was dealing with of like, am I even gonna get on this roster? I was doubted, I was called too aggressive, I was labeled a problem, and I was being bullied physically and verbally from that skater from the year previously in social situations, and then started to happen on the track. So, you know, I started to feel isolated and isolated myself and didn't really want to interact. And at derby, I wasn't like my normal, like, yeah, let's play and let's think about this strategy and that strategy. I started to become quiet, and I felt in distress a lot.
Can you give an example of like what a microaggression at the beginning of the season was? I mean, you mentioned being called aggressive. That's definitely a thing.
Yeah. So there was that happening, and then my coach pulled me aside for a chat. Hey, let's, have a chat. I don't know this person. We haven't really had any interaction. He came once a week to practice, and in my opinion, I was just like, he doesn't really see what's going on. And so he pulled me aside, and, so he had this perception that I was aggressive and angry, and told me that straight up. You're too aggressive and you're angry. And I was like, what? I don't feel that I'm doing anything else other than just playing roller derby, and I may not be smiling all the time, but I feel like, because I feel a little bit in distress and isolated. And he's like, well, maybe you should try to smile more.
Okay.
Maybe you should not talk at roller derby about strategy. And to me, I'm like, whoa, that's big, because I value my brain. And my roller derby strategy is valued in this community, and so that felt really harmful to me, and I kind of became like angry inside, and that triggered me, and my way of dealing with that was just to go silent and say, okay, all right, fine, whatever, blah, wall up. I was out of there. What did you experience at the beginning of the season?
So I started that season as the captain, a co-captain, and was trying to change team culture. There's definitely some stuff from the previous season that didn't sit comfortably, or I wanted to work on like building more of a positive team culture. So I had that going on, and then I had my partner in very visible distress. And so whilst maybe our teammates didn't see what that looked like, I saw it at home, and was watching Mick have a really hard time. But I felt I was really ill-equipped, and the way that I was trying to lead was trying to bring people along. And I felt really scared of being like, I just want that player like off the team, because she's bullying like my partner, but also just a teammate. Like Mick is also my teammate. But I felt like my hands were tied to do anything about it, because it would be perceived as just like looking out for my girlfriend. So I didn't really do anything at the beginning of the season. But I could see Mick not fitting in. Sometimes we'd go home from practice and I'd be like, how did that go? And Mick would be like, I think it went really well. I think it was really, really positive. And I was watching the interactions being like, it's not positive at all. I know what Australians... I know PASAG, like passive aggressive, not actually saying what's going on, but reading everybody's body language, and I could see Mick not reading it. And that was like my first time of like, whoa, okay. Because you know how to pass in American society.
Code switch.
Sorry, yeah, you can code switch, not pass. But in Australia, it's different. Like, we're white folk, but we're different white folk. So we're seeing that. And then we went to this like rad as hell performance called Hot Brown Honeys, which is a group of First Nations women like from the Pacific. They put together an incredible performance piece, and if it ever comes to Turtle Island, we will let you all know, because you all need to go. It's wonderful. And they did like lots of performance. They're just like fierce as hell brown women. There was like a piece particularly on microaggressions, and I remember having a conversation with you after that, and you were like, I'm experiencing microaggressions all the time. And I didn't know what that meant. And microaggressions are one of those things that are really easy to brush aside, because as like that definition said, they're subtle. They can be unintentional. And I've never experienced it. So how the hell am I going to know what that is? But going to that and the conversations we had afterwards was a turning point. So I was like, all right, I need to like start bridging this gap. That's my job. And so I started having conversations with people in leadership, And we actually encouraged everybody on our team to go to that performance, and most, like quite a lot of them did. And so we're like, great,
It's gonna all get better.
yeah, it's gonna be perfect now. Because how can you not leave that unchanged? But it was a great thing to be like, hey, you went to that performance. They talked about this. Can you see that maybe this difficult, like Mick is the problem, maybe is that she's the only brown person on an all-white team, and that maybe it would feel like unsafe, and maybe it's hard at times for her, not actually just for you. And I don't even think I'd used, like, I don't think I'd said racism, but immediately I got the kind of like back stiffen. I'm not racist. Like, not saying you are, but you are. And I am. And, you know, if we're a white person that's grown up in this society, we're just racist, right? So let's just put it out there now. We are, and we have to work to undo that. And I'll be working my whole life to undo it. It's not changed, like, at this point. I have shitty thoughts, and then I have to remember there are other stories, and I need to change those thoughts. So that was the sort of beginning of that. And it was met with, like, yeah, I'm not racist. Never thought about it, because Mick was read as American. So they hadn't, like, it was a kind of don't see colour. Like, we're not treating her any differently. Like, it's not about the colour of her skin. But the way that her body language was being read was she was in distress, but she was called angry and aggressive. And she was having a really hard time, but she was seen as the problem. And things like, you can't expect me to know all of that. Like, when I did start talking about racism, like, how am I meant to know? And so, like, the main things that I took away at the beginning of the season was, I think that it exposed white privilege, that everybody on my team had never, like, so rarely actually interacted with brown folk. And I think there's much more interaction that happens, like, in America. Not that it is then perfect at all. But Australia's real white. And are you about to tap me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanna say something.
Okay, you say something.
Well, I was going to say the key point for me in that first part was labeling something a microaggression and telling somebody, because I stew in them. It's every day. I can walk into a store and I'm being followed anytime I go to a co-op.
Yeah.
You know, in spaces that I feel really like I should feel comfortable in, I'm not, because those things happen, those little microaggressions. So for me, I needed to say it. I needed to find an ally on my team. It happened to be my partner. I also found another teammate, and Shayna, and tried to tell them both, like, this is what I'm experiencing. I need people on my side. And I did have to do that emotional labor, but it's worth it, because, you know, I love these people and they love me, and so we are trying to learn together. So that was the key point for me at the beginning.
Yeah. I read this quote this morning about white privilege, and it said, also, Renee Ito Lodge, just going to plug again. White privilege is dull, grinding complacency. It is par for the course in a world where drastic race inequality is responded to with a shoulder shrug and considered just the norm. So it was kind of like, don't really get it, don't really see it. Okay. So then I realized, and I started to be like, okay, Mick's not American. Like, let's get that straight. She's Diné, so she's Indigenous, and I tried to, like, be like, so the equivalent in Australia would be, she would be like an Aboriginal woman from a remote community, because she grew up on the res. And, you know, if that person was on our team, man, they would, like, stick out as being different. And I think people would register it a bit more because of that cultural, that same country context, but in this, and maybe they wouldn't, also probably not. So I don't want to, anyway. So first time having those conversations that were, like, interpersonal and trying to bring people along. I'm going to be honest, it was a little bit weak. Like, I'm a bit of a gently kind of dude. I'm getting less gently. But that was the start.
But that's okay, and we need that. So we went to Big O, and that, those first few months were hard. We went to Big O. I was dealing already with like internalized misogyny on the team, bullying, racism, no one to talk to. And I don't want to burden people. I don't talk about stuff. I'm a bottler, and I deal with it in my own way, but usually that's just ignoring it and doing some self-care and like trying to forget that happened. I isolated myself, and I had this really awful experience at the after party where our coach, who had pulled me aside earlier, said some disparaging things about a team that we played. And it just infuriated me because, number one, they are our competitors, but they are our friends. And I don't like to talk about people like that I'm competing against, especially because we've been competing against each other for years. Why would we talk about people that way that we know and that we have fun with, and that you meet at RollerCon and then you're on different teams, right? So I lashed out at that person and then was like, I need to get out of here. Like, that wasn't okay. But it is okay. When we are a person that is experiencing those things, we don't have to be the perfect victim, and that is something that we think about all the time. We can get frustrated. We can deal with it in shitty ways. It doesn't mean, we don't have to have an air of virtue and like perfect, be on this platitude. And if we break down, like, we're human, and I had to forgive myself for that. And but in the end result of that experience, I just decided to be quiet and smile from then on, because then at least I wouldn't be experiencing that stuff. So a few months later, like a month and a half, 6 weeks? Yeah. 6 weeks later, there's a big tournament in Australia called TGSS. The Great Southern Slam. We went. Bonnie had just injured their ankle, and I was injured from the person on the team. My back was injured in my shoulder, and I had also gone on a coaching trip to Europe, so I didn't make attendance for that tournament, and I didn't really care. I honestly was like, I need a break. So we went to that tournament, and I knew that I needed to make a safety plan for myself, and as a POC person, we're probably used to that. We're used to going in. I'm used to going into a place and knowing where the exits are. I'm used to parking my car so I can leave. Like, I've grown up in dangerous situations. Not that I put myself in them, but I'm aware of that stuff. I'm aware of who's in the room, who's in my back. And so I needed to make a safety plan for this space, which I hadn't done before in a derby party. So that was weird. Besides, no cash in public and no whiskey at bars or something, like, those kind of safety plans of like not being crazy. So I made a safety plan to just like stay really positive, to stay with the people on my team that I felt like were my allies and were my friends, and I wanted to stretch out and meet new people on the B team and the C team, because I just felt isolated, and I was like, there's many wonderful people in this league. I need to meet them. And we did, and we met really great people that are our friends. And the tournament went on, and it was fine. And then the after party happened, and that skater that had been bullying me was quite drunk, and I had been drinking too, and the party was huge. It was like, I don't know, 1,000 people or something in a room, and lots of little dance circles everywhere, and I just kept getting followed, and that like really weird stuff that happens in junior high when someone's standing there you don't like, and you push this person so they bump into them, so that you're like, oh, I didn't mean to, weird stuff like that. Or someone walking by you and like pretending to dance and hit you in the head. That happened. And it kept happening, and I kept trying to leave. And so I found a friend that was not Bon and just said, can you just watch me? Because I need a witness. And I'm trying to have a good time, and I don't want to just leave, because I had already isolated myself. I just wanted to have fun. And so that friend watched, and I'm very lucky that happened, because things escalated and escalated, and it resulted in that skater trying to launch themselves at me and punch me. And that person intervened at kind of the right moment, because I was just kind of like stunned, and there's an angry person coming at me with a fist, and they got pulled away right away. And then I just broke down in tears and left. But it was a turning point for us also in this experience of being an ally, when a microaggression turns into a physical aggression.
So now we're going to hear a really low point for me. So Mick was really upset, and I was just honestly on the periphery of the party. I was on crutches, I couldn't be involved in anything. And I saw Mick come out, and I knew she was drunk, and she just kind of looked crazy to me. And we got out of the party, we got home, we got back to where we were staying, and Mick started to tell me what happened. I think he said you'd put your finger up at her and swore at her because she kept coming at you, and something like that. And yeah, basically told me the story. And what I said to her was, well, what was your part in it? Yeah, real bad. And Mick just broke down at that point, and didn't really, that was done. We were done that night. I couldn't do anything I just made a really, really terrible situation 100 times worse because it happened. There was another aggression that happened with me. And we were then driving home together from Adelaide back to Melbourne. That's about a 10, 11 hour drive, so we had a lot of time to talk. And Mick told me what that felt like and how damaging that was. And the way that I have grown up is I always think about personal responsibility for myself, and that's a really important value. I'm maybe overthinking what's my part in it, what am I doing? But in the conversation that we had, I recognised that's really messed up to say to somebody who is experiencing bullying and is a victim in a situation, is what's your part in it? Because it's totally fine for her to be yeah, get the fuck out of my space. But I'm I don't really respond maybe I do sometimes now. But I'm polite, really polite, to the point that maybe that value overrode actually seeing this really messed up situation and questioning Mick in that. So we got through that part. I ate a lot of humble pie and was just wow, I really, really messed up. And then we had a conversation about restorative justice, and Mick told me, when we got to well, what do we do now? Okay, this situation has escalated, where do we go with it? Talk to me about restorative justice and that being a cultural value as a Diné person and what it looks like. And I think, honestly, I feel that was one of the first points, not the first point, but a really major point of seeing her as a Diné person, not just as my partner or a person of colour, but her in her context. And it also, I think, stopped me listening to all of the white voices. That's the bit that I forgot to talk about at the beginning of the season, is lots of white people were talking to me about Mick being a problem. And it's easy for me, much easier I think for me, to understand their perspective, because I don't read Mick's body language correctly sometimes. I've now learnt to ask, and now I read it a bit better because we're 3 years into a relationship, but then we were new. But I've now learnt to ask. But so I could understand why things were being read in certain ways, because I also do exactly the same thing. And I think after that I just went, no, actually this is messed up. It was a very, very large turning point, where I'm always I'm trying to see all sides of the story. I'm trying to be fair. I'm trying to see all of the bits to actually what's happening in this situation is messed up. And like I said before, racism doesn't just disappear because you love somebody. I still have that whole lens of being white and identifying with what white people say, how they perceive it. So the main takeaways from that is, if people of colour are telling you that...
I would say marginalised people.
Okay.
Because it's not just people of colour experiencing oppression in Derby.
Yeah. Believe them. If they're sharing stories about microaggression, don't gaslight. Just listen to it. Even if you have that happen in your head, because that happens in my head. I reckon probably it happens in many of your guys' heads too. Just sit on it. Do not verbalise it. And question yourself. Why is it difficult for me to see this? Why? Okay, it's not my experience. Question yourself. Don't question that other person, because you're going to do a whole lot of damage by verbalizing that stuff at that point. And maybe go away and like work on it yourself and find some resources to work through that stuff, because there are different ways to explain those things. And if you mess up, be willing to confront it and not shut down into like white guilt, and continue to be open. Because I think that was probably like a point that you pretty damn close to breaking up with me. If I'd held that line, I think Mick would have like been out, and I would have like missed a really beautiful relationship with somebody. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think at one point I said, like, stop gaslighting me, and you asked what that was, and I was like, Google it! Like, challenge each other also. Like, I don't also have to do all of that work. I just say, read this stuff, and let's talk about it in a week. When you've processed it, we don't have to hash everything out when it's present. We can give it time and learn and talk and blah, 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 and do what we need to do for ourselves, and then come back to it.
Yeah.
So with that restorative justice piece, which is really important to me, and it's something that I've become better at through my life. I'm not this like amazing person. I'm a human that makes a lot of mistakes, but I always have that cultural value of restorative justice, and I have it tattooed on my arm to remind myself that I need to work through something with people rather than just shutting them out. And as I said before, I've done that, but it doesn't serve me and it doesn't serve them. So something that is in that piece is advocating for yourself and learning how to do that with confidence. And it's really hard when you're by yourself, but when you have an ally, when you have a partner, when you have good friends, you can do that in a way that you can like confirm that you're doing the right thing.
Thank you for listening to Off the Track Episode 10, Part 1 of Allyship. We'll release Part 2, where we delve into policy, failure of policy, systemic racism within organizations, and how we as POC can bring along our allies. We'll also speak to allies bringing along more allies and doing that emotional labor on our behalf. I want to mention before we close the show that this episode is not being released without fear, without anxiety, but that I am releasing it because I feel that in the roller derby community, we only see and hear about trauma and drama surrounding events. Our community needs to hear more stories of resolution, healing, and restorative justice. So I'd like to share with you a few things happening. A couple of weeks ago, Thin Air Throwdown tournament saw Denver, VRDL, and Rose City playing a round of games against each other in preparation for champs. At the end of a very good recap, the Apex called out VRDL as a league and asked them what they were doing to reconcile with the skaters who have spoken out against racism and bullying that has been happening. The VRDL response was, quote, "We can't comment on internal allegations while investigations are taking place. We recognize the structural issues we have in the league and that they will take time and effort to address. We'll keep doing the work until we get it right." Luckily, I can speak to my work with VRDL. I refuse to sign any sort of NDA agreement when working with them, because I really believe that everything must be exposed in order to sort through it if we're going to do it as a community through restorative justice, which is what we just talked about. So I just want to say that I've received an apology letter from VRDL. I received my dues that I put into the league back in recognition of the emotional labor that I had put into exposing the racism that's happening in, of course, with other people. But that's all that has happened so far. I've further asked for mediation with specific folks in order to just clear the air and figure out ways to move forward and not let it just always be hanging around. And it's always hanging around still. And we know that because the Apex brought it up. I'm having many conversations, both difficult and healing, with a small number of friends. 2 of them stepped off the All-Stars this season. And one of them, Sage King, has publicly stated she left the league in response to the systemic racism and bullying the league has failed to address. She further stated that her bullying complaint is ongoing. look, I'd like to say that VRDL is doing a bad job. I'd like to say that their inability to move forward with all of these complaints and mediation is because they're not trying. But that wouldn't be true. They are trying. But let me be very specific about that. They are trying as a league executive committee. But there is a saying along the lines of, you can lead an all-star to water, but you can't make them drink. So take from that what you will. But what I'm focusing on is my relationships with people, the people that I care about and I want to spend that emotional labor with. We're building back our relationships. We're spending time talking. I'm asking them to listen to podcast episodes. We've found books together, that some people are reading. Bonnie is building a Facebook group for allies and one to really talk about and address some of these issues and address white fragility and white supremacy and how they're complicit in it. And so there's a lot of work going into this, but it's very thoughtful and it's in the place where I know that energy will be reciprocated. So that's kind of an update about what's going on currently. I would like to give a shout out and say thank you so much to Ivana and Legs and all the crew at RollerCon. Without them, these conversations would not have taken place in such a public way, without folks recognizing, how they can use their resources as allies to support POC. So I really, thank them for that. And I can't wait for us to go back next year. Also want to say thank you to all of our Team Indigenous teammates who attended RollerCon. They came to all of the workshops and were supportive. Some of them were able to facilitate the caucus sessions afterwards, and we also met lots of new Indigenous players that we've added to our group of friends and comrades. So just want to say thank you so much for supporting and for all of your kind words and messages afterwards. It matters because that's why we're talking about this. And that's why I'm being so public with it, is because I want people to really realize that it happens at every level. It happens for all of us, but there is a way through it. So thank you.
Conversations from the world of women's sports. This is Wisp Sports Radio.
If you have any questions about this episode or any others, you can ask and I will air your question and my response. There's a really awesome app called VoiceByte. It's Byte with a Y, so VoiceByte. And you ask a question, you use the hashtag Wisp Sports, so WISPSPORTS. You can also find the ability to use VoiceByte on wispsports.com. On the right-hand side of the front page, there's a button for it, so you can ask a question there as well. And we will play your question live on the show, and I will answer it. So please ask away. For more conversations from the world of women's sport, subscribe to Wisp Sports Radio on your podcast app and visit wispsports.com for blogs, articles, and videos where you'll find show notes and links for this episode. You can join in the conversation by following us on social media at Wisp Sports and by emailing us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at info@wispsports. Wisp Sports Radio can be found on any podcast app. Follow Wisp Sports on social media at Wisp Sports. And please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes to help promote coverage of women in sport. Thanks for listening to Off the Track and supporting women in sport everywhere.